Today we're going to be talking about a few different Black LGBT trailblazers and their impacts.
Before we get started on the presentation, we want to give all of you an idea of what we're going to be talking about today. First, we'll be giving introductions of who we are and a chance for you guys to introduce yourselves. Second, we'll be going over the history and the context of the environment and treatment toward Black queer individuals. Third, we'll be talking about different Black LGBT trailblazers, including Marsha P. Audre Lorde, Willi Ninja, and Alvin Ailey. Lastly, we'll be talking about the impacts each trailblazer had about their actions and their impacts on our lives today. Hello, my name is Sulema Villa. I go by the pronoun she, her, hers. I'm a public health major and I'm an outreach and engagement intern along with a social justice educator.
Hi everyone, my name is Camila Unive. I use any pronouns. I'm a sociology major and I'm a social justice educator as well as the Joy de la Cruz art and activism intern.
We want to ask all of you if you're familiar with any Black LGBT trailblazers. You can type your response in the chat.
I know before making this presentation, I have heard about Marsha P. Johnson, for example. As a queer person, I know she had a really big impact on the LGBTQ community, so I'm really excited to be talking about her in a little bit.
For myself, it was Willi Ninja, since I had an interest in drag back in high school and learning about the history of it. So I'm also excited to talk about him today. So before we begin the presentation, I want to give a bit of context of where we stand today. So right now we're able to celebrate Pride Month and other events to safely express your sexuality and identity. However, to reach this point, the Stonewall riots were a big tipping point for the gay liberation movement. However, today we want to talk about how we reached this point and who helped pave the road for self-expression. In today's presentation, we'll be answering this question with different LGBTQ African Americans who have shaped the course of American history. Throughout the presentation, we will highlight different Black trailblazers and their individual contributions and legacy. I'd also like to talk about the environment that each one of these individuals were living in. It is not exactly the same for all of them. However, the same context was present for all of them. Each one was living in a supposed liberal and welcoming environment in the US. However, it was actually riddled with homophobia. The 1950s and 60s were known as the most homophobic period in American history due to the disproportionately targeting of the LGBTQ community, specifically African Americans. In comparison to their white counterparts, they were likelier to be targeted and likelier to suffer less opportunities for economic and social positions. As a result, they were likelier to have less opportunities to climb the social ladders, and their history in the LGBTQ history was erased and forgotten. But today we'll be talking about it. And just like this quote says, racism combined with the forces of stigma, phobia, discrimination, and bias associated with gender and sexuality have too often erased the contributions of members of our community.
The first Black LGBT trailblazer we want to talk about today is Marsha P. Johnson. And the P in Marsha P. Johnson stands for Pay It No Mind, which was her life motto. She was born in 1945 in New Jersey and died in 1992 in New York City. She used to call herself a drag queen and a cross-dresser before she came out as transgender, and she was a transgender activist as well as a sex worker. She grew up feeling kind of out of place with her family. They didn't support her decision in being transgender. And so after high school, she moved to New York City, where she began participating in drag and really experimenting with her gender expression. And that is when she came out as transgender. As a Black trans woman, it was very difficult for her to make money, and which is why she ended up turning to sex work, where she faced a lot of violence. She was a prominent figure in the Stonewall riots and in the gay liberation movement. And even though she was a really important figure, that does not mean that she didn't face violence and oppression. She was arrested over 100 times in her time as an activist, and oftentimes she was homeless or extremely poor. She slept on the street or in buses or in shops whenever she could. Her and another transgender activist, Sylvia Rivera, helped found the Street Transvestite Activist Revolutionaries, otherwise known as STAR, and they housed and fed houseless trans youth. I think it started off pretty small. The first organizing event they did was they found this abandoned bus, and they kind of created it into this like mini mobile home, and there were about 24 people living in there. And she always did her best to help her community and help those around her. Her friends in her community described her as an incredibly generous person, and she always tried her best to make sure people were nourished, had their basic needs, even if she herself didn't have them. She also battled with HIV and AIDS and was an advocate for people struggling with that as well. I wanted to show you all this short 2.5-minute video about her life. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that.
Turn around, you're on TV, Marsha.
Marsha P. Johnson is remembered as an activist and free spirit, with flowers or Christmas lights in her hair, and said to be one of the first rioters at Stonewall in 1969. Before the term transgender entered the lexicon, Marsha called herself a transvestite or a drag queen.
When I became a drag queen, I started to live my life as a woman.
During her life, she and other trans activists struggled to be fully accepted in the gay community, which often excluded trans people. Marsha was often homeless, supporting herself through sex work and repeatedly arrested, but she attracted many friends to help her. A fellow activist once saw Marsha asleep under a table of lilies at a flower shop. The employees welcomed her because they thought she was holy. Once, a judge asked Marsha what the P in her name stood for. She explained.
Pay no mind Johnson. Marsha pay no mind Johnson.
The judge, charmed, said, "And that's exactly what I'm going to do." She was released. She was well known in New York's Greenwich Village, where she became an icon after the Stonewall riots.
I was one of the first girls to ever come in drags to the Stonewall. 1969, when the Stonewall riot started, that's when I started my rioting.
As one story recounts, during the riots, Marsha threw a shot glass into a mirror at the bar after police entered, shouting, "I got my civil rights." Marsha was a founding member of the Gay Liberation Front, and she formed STAR in 1970 with Sylvia Rivera, a transgender woman and activist. It was revolutionary in its direct support for the trans community. Together, they opened STAR House, a shelter for homeless LGBTQ youth. She was also an advocate for those affected by HIV and AIDS, and rejected the stigma and shame associated with the virus.
I think you should stand as close to them as you can and help out as much as you can. Including myself, I have HIV.
She remained devoted to her Christian faith throughout her life. Friends say she could be found praying in various churches, at times dressed in velvet, throwing glitter. Marsha died in 1992 at the age of 46. At the time, police said she'd taken her own life, a claim friends disputed.
I mean, it's hard for me to believe that she would commit suicide.
The case was reopened in 2012 as a possible homicide. Like Marsha, trans women continue to suffer from long-standing discrimination and violence. Her legacy reflects the ongoing struggle for transgender people to be safe and receive equal rights.
People to realize that we're all brothers and sisters and human beings in the human race.
So after learning a little bit about her, I wanted to talk about her impacts on our lives today. Thanks to all her work, the Marsha P. Johnson Institute was created. And according to their mission statement, they protect and defend the human rights of Black transgender people. And they do that by organizing, advocating, creating an intentional community to heal, developing transformative leadership, and promoting our collective power. And if we can take anything away from the way that she was, is she taught us that in community there is strength, and especially for Black trans people who are grappling with survival.
Next, I'd like to talk about Willi Ninja. Willi Ninja, also known as William R. Link, was born in 1961 in Queens. At the age of 7, he had already started dancing, specifically his voguing style. But at the age of 20, he had already perfected it and was part of the Harlem drag ball scene in New York. At that point, the Harlem drag ball scene had started to fragment among racial lines due to the intensification of the civil rights movement. As a result, Black queens were forced to widen up their face and face harsher criticism and competition in comparison to their white counterparts. As a response, Black queens started to stage their own events called houses. Houses were meant to be an extended system of the drag ball scene to provide a home to navigate racism, homophobia, class oppression, and transphobia. Other than that, houses were meant to provide guidance on perfecting your dancing style and also your own sexual identity. Ninja is credited as being the mother to the House of Ninja, which he founded in 1982. He adopted multiple young people who were disowned by their family and friends for being gay. His house was also known as the House of Ninja because he wanted his dancers to be known as quick and agile and smooth for their dancing skills. Beside his house creating a safe space for Black individuals, he was also known for his dancing style, Vogue. This was a new dancing style that had not been seen before, since it focused on exaggerated movements based on fashion models on the cover of Vogue. His dance style has started to gain more attention. However, with the rise of the New York drag ball scene, it started to reach a more worldwide movement. In the next slide, I'll be showing a 2-minute and 20-second clip about Ninja talking about the voguing style and also demonstrating it himself.
You know, you have to have something to offer in order to lead. The mother usually becomes the mother because she's usually the best one out of the group.
I'm Willi Ninja, the mother of the House of Ninja.
Give him what he wants!
I'm the mother of the House of Ninja because they say I'm the best voguer out. To be the mother of the house, you have to have the most power. Take a real family. It's the mother that's the hardest worker, and the mother gets the most respect. As far as my naming my house, the House of Ninja, ninjas hit hard, they hit fast, an invisible assassin, and that's what we are. We come out to assassinate.
Voguing came from shade because it was a dance that two people did because they didn't like each other. Instead of fighting, you would dance it out on the dance floor, and whoever did the better moves was throwing the best shade, basically.
No touching, neither one of you. If you touch, I'm chopping you. I'm telling you right now.
You could take the pantomime form of the Vogue. This is what generally sometimes I do, is I make my hand into a form like a compact or a makeup kit, and I'm like beating my face with blush, shadows, or whatever to the music. Then usually I'll turn the compact around to face that person, meaning like almost like my hand is a mirror for them to get a look. Then I'll start doing their face because what they have on their face right now needs a dramatic makeup job. Like breakdancing, the dance takes from the hieroglyphics of ancient Egypt. It also takes some forms of gymnastics. They both strive for perfect lines in the body, awkward positions, but it goes one step further. It's starting to make a name for itself, but I want it to be known worldwide, and I want to be on top of it when it hits. I want to take voguing not to just Paris is burning, but I want to take it to the real Paris and make the real Paris burn.
I hope all of you enjoyed that clip. So next, I want to talk about Willi Ninja's impact today. So as I previously mentioned, the New York drag ball scene has started to gain more attention worldwide, and specifically Ninja's style of voguing was getting more attention. As the video had mentioned, the documentary Paris is Burning, which is focused on drag queens from New York, brought him more attention for his signature style of voguing. As a result, he was sought out by multiple celebrities and designers to participate in their work. He was sought to choreograph, to be a musician, to be a runway model, and a modeling coach. And some of these examples include modeling in the runway show for fashion designer Jean Paul Gaultier and Terry McGlare. He was also in the video Deep in Vogue by Malcolm McLaurin and was also part of America's Next Model as a modeling coach. Besides this, he was also the influence for one of Madonna's most well-known songs, Vogue, and also a coach to Naomi Campbell and Paris Hilton. And he was also a backup dancer for Janet Jackson for 3 of her songs in her Revelation portion of her music career. Ninja's career paved the way for Black queer artistic expression in space that was originally restricted from them and worked against them. He created a space of community for gender expression and real identity. His impression in the dance world will forever live on through his signature style boogie and through his countless references in social media and pop media. Ninja did die at 45 due to an AIDS-related heart disease. However, his children carry on his legacy and also use his platform to raise attention for HIV and AIDS through different conversations and campaigns for the Black gay community.
We had a check-in question for you all. Did you recognize any of the impacts in your own life today? Maybe you resonated with some of the impacts, or maybe you recognize some of the people we talked about so far. Feel free to drop your responses in the chat. I know for me, thinking about Willi Ninja, for example, I personally had never even heard of him before, but I have seen all his impacts in my life for the last few years. Like when I first learned about voguing, it's such a fun dance to do, and I've been doing it for a few months, but I had never even learned about him. Or I've seen Madonna's music video, Vogue. I love that song, but I've never heard of him. So it's so amazing to be able to like know where all these things come from. Looks like someone put in the chat, I've been thinking about linkages in dance moves in the Black diaspora, and the compact dance move is something I've seen in East African dance tradition. Oh, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing. Someone else has also heard of Willi Ninja and the Vogue scene before. Awesome. The next person we're going to be talking about today is Audre Lorde. She is a Black lesbian mother, warrior, and poet, and those are her own words. She was born in 1934 in New York City to Grenadian parents and died in 1992. She got her bachelor's and master's in library science. Before she came out as a lesbian, she was actually married and had a husband and had a daughter. And even though she went to school for her library science, she's been a poet and a writer since her early childhood. She dedicated her life and her creative talent to confronting and addressing injustices of racism, sexism, classism, and homophobia. A lot of her poetry is known for the power of its call for social and racial justice, as well as its depictions of queer experience and sexuality. Her poetry and her writings are central to many liberation movements, including second wave feminism, the civil rights movement, Black cultural movements, and the LGBT liberation movement. In 1980, Lorde and Barbara Smith, another Black woman, helped create a new publishing house, the Kitchen Table Women of Color Press. And this was really important because it was a way for Black women especially, and women of color to be able to tell their stories as authentically and truthfully as possible without having to edit it for the publishing company. So I want to share a video with you all. It's a few different clips of Audre Lorde talking, and she also recites a little bit of her poetry.
I'm finishing this piece of my bargain. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter how long it takes to finish it, I don't know. But that is the shape of where I am living and functioning. And that I'm going on to something else the shape of which I have no idea. All thing I know is it's going to be quite different. What I leave behind has a life of its own. I've said this about poetry. I've said it about children. Well, in a sense, I'm saying it about the very artifact of who I have been.
For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial, alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways, coming and going in the hours between dawn, looking inward and outward at once, before and after, seeking nows that can breed future.
I remembered all of those particular things. I started writing because I had a need inside of me to create something that was not there.
Now you say you're lonely. You cry the whole
I was editor of my high school magazine, and I wrote a poem about love. And the student advisor, the faculty advisor, said it was a bad sonnet. And I really knew that it was a good one, do you see? But I knew that she didn't like it because of the things that I said in it. So I sent it off to 17 magazine, and they bought it. And I made more money from that one poem than I made for the next 10 years.
You say you're sorry for being so untrue.
Before I talk about her impacts today, I wanted to mention a few of her books that she's published. One of them is called Cables to Rage. That one was published in 1970, and it was her first poetic expression of her lesbianism. Then in 1978, she published a book called Black Unicorn, and it was a compilation of writings and poems about her experience being a mother and searching for her roots in Africa. And then in 1980, she published a series of poems and writings called the Cancer Journals, which were about her 14-year-long cancer battle. And in it, she also critiqued the healthcare system a lot and her experience as a Black woman in the healthcare system. But moving on to her impact, she made enormous contributions to the lesbian feminist movement, and a lot of her writings are still used today in spaces that advocate for racial and social justice. Because of her lived experience, a lot of those focus on the intersections between queerness, womanhood, and Blackness. There's an organization called the Audre Lorde Project, and they focus a lot on radical self-care. There's a quote by Audre Lorde that's kind of their motto. It goes, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare." If you want to go ahead and check out their website, you can scan the QR code that's in the bottom left corner. And so on the slide, you'll see two charts. And we actually talk about this in our Self-Care as Resistance workshop. And there's a YouTube video of that on our YouTube channel. So feel free to check that out. They do a really good job. But I'm going to go briefly over it. So in the top right corner, you'll see a wellness planning chart. And what Audre Lorde talked about when it came to radical self-care was all about making your needs known and how are you going to address those and where are you going to address and who can help you address those needs. And it was a very holistic and all-encompassing way of addressing your wellness. So there's your heart, your body, your mind, and your community. And you need to address all of those in order to feel well-rounded. And so you can actually find these charts on the Audre Lorde Project website and fill them out yourself if you want to do that. It's really helpful. I did it myself and it was almost like a journal session or a therapy session. So if you have the capacity and the time, I would recommend that you do that.
So next I'll be talking about Alvin Ailey. He was also another dancer. He was born on January 5th, 1931 during the Great Depression in a violently racist town in Texas. His father left him at a young age, so to escape the suffrage that he had at home due to his mother currently having to work all the time, he would go to the local church to watch the adults dance. There he found his passion to dance, but he didn't pursue it till after college. As a teenager, his mother left to LA and he quickly followed her after. It was in Los Angeles that he started to see more dancing, such as ballet and the Catherine Dunham Dance Academy, that initiated his passion again, but he didn't pursue it till after college. He went on to study Romance language at UCLA, and after he officially pursued dance at the Lester Horton Dance Company. He participated in multiple Broadway shows, the most well-known being The House of Flowers, and multiple other ones. Throughout this time, he had began to collect more dance experience and create his own signature style. Once Lester Horton had passed away, he decided to make his own dance academy, which I'll talk about more in the next slide. Before he went on to start his own dance company, he started to collect dancers and build his own vision, which was characterized by a dynamic and a vibrant mix of choreography that drew on his previous experience from modern jazz, ballet, modern dance, and African dance techniques. As I previously mentioned, Alvin Ailey had begun to collect his own dancers because he wanted to start his own dance academy. In 1958, he officially founded the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater and its affiliated school, the Ailey School, which acted as a haven for nurturing Black artists and expressing the universality of the African American experience through dance. They went on to become a hugely popular multiracial modern dance ensemble that popularized modern dance around the world thanks to its extensive world tours. In the dance theater, his most well-known works were Cry, which depicted the blood memories of growing up in Texas surrounded by the blues, the spirits, the church, and racism. His also other well-known work, Revelations, which was meant to depict the suffrage of an African-American mother and the struggles of raising her children. Alvin Ailey's choreography sought to express the experience of African Americans and their struggles in America. Alvin Ailey's choreography sought to also express racism. However, despite Alvin Ailey having a lot of success, he did have a lot of struggles in booking companies that would respect his work and not label it as ethnic. Despite these struggles, Alvin Ailey persevered to book tours and showcase his work. His career went on to last 50 years, in which he worked with the American Ballet Theater, the Paris Opera Ballet, and the London Festival Ballet. He also went on to receive multiple awards, such as the NAACP, which stood for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and the United Nations Peace Medal. Alvin Ailey is being credited for a Black queer individual who paved the way for dance scene and expressed their own individual stories. And in the next slide, I'll be showing a 1-minute clip of some of the key moments from his Cry performance.
Before we end our presentation today, I wanted to share this quote by Audre Lorde. It goes, I have a duty to speak the truth as I see it and share not just my triumphs, not just the things that felt good, but the pain, the intense, often unmitigated pain. It is important to share how I know survival is survival and not just to walk through the rain. And the reason I'm sharing this quote with you all today is because what we can learn from all the four trailblazers we talked about today is that they all did their best to live their lives as truthfully and as authentically as possible, which leads us to our concluding exercise. How do you plan on speaking your own truth? So I prepared a Padlet exercise for you all, and we dropped the link in the chat so you all can participate. There's also the QR code if you're watching on YouTube. You can go add something to it so we can all look at what we're writing together. I already added to it. I said that for me to speak my truth, I plan on continuing to make art. Someone wrote, to show up in my intersectional identities unapologetically. Yes, I love that. Someone said to keep on making art as well. I love that. Art is so therapeutic and it really helps me express myself, and I hope it does the same for you. To show my real identity. Yes, I hope you can show up as your most honest and realist self wherever you are. Someone posted, by being my most authentic self and not caring if being me disrupts whatever norm is in place. Yes, definitely. I think it's so hard, but it's like once you do it, it brings you so much peace because you're just being yourself. Someone else shared, going to places and being in spaces that honor my authentic identities. Yes, that's so important. It's really important to surround yourself or your community with people who accept you as your most true self. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. It was so nice to hear your responses. And so I wanted to share with you all the sources we used to create this presentation today, in case you were interested in researching these people more, or if you wanted to check out some of the organizations that we mentioned today, like the Audre Lorde Project or the Marsha P. Johnson Institute, to name a few.